Welcome to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation's The Business Program. I'm Tambay Obenson, film critic, TV critic, and writer. Now, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce today's panel, J. David Shanks, Aaron Rahsaan Thomas, J. Alex Brinson, and Barbara Marshall. Thank you guys for being a part of this conversation, and I hope it's enlightening, stimulating for people watching, but maybe even for you guys as well. First things first, just before this conversation, I was looking up the term propaganda, and I really wanted to know what the origin of it was, and I couldn't quite find an origin, or even when it was coined. There was something that went all the way back to the 70s, but he didn't actually use the word itself, but he described what essentially propaganda is. So I want to first just confirm that everyone on this panel is in agreement that it is a phenomenon, it is a real thing. Or if anyone wants to push back against that narrative, please, you're welcome to do so.
I think we probably have a consensus.
Okay.
I'm pretty certain we're on the same page. With it, there's a definite narrative that has been pushed for many years that depicts policing and police, almost romanticizes the job, what it entails, what officers are asked to do, and their interactions, with, the community. Me personally, because I worked as a cop for 6 years in Chicago, my perspective is a little different than some of the police shows that, I, as a youngster, watched, growing up, and the depiction of, police and their interactions with the community. So, yeah, happy to be a part of a discussion like this to, hopefully, like I said, push the creative needle, in a direction that's authentic and realistic and actually helpful, for the community.
I think too, when it comes to the term, and it's great to have David part of this discussion, because I think you don't often hear the perspective from an officer of color who's actually done the job. It's valuable to listen. But the term itself, oftentimes these terms get tossed around as kind of, I think I blame social media partly for it, as kind of whatever people want to define it as, like a lot of other things. But it actually does have a technical root in that the early procedurals, the cop procedurals coming out of cowboy Western shows, when they transitioned into urban crime shows, meaning shows like Dragnet, Adam 12, The Rookies, these shows in the 70s where Clint Eastwood went from being cowboy to cop, the Brinson era, the Clint Eastwood era.
Dirty Harry.
A lot of those shows had direct input from police departments, meaning the police departments weren't just consultants. They a lot of times had approval of the material that was displayed, or the stories that were told through those shows. So when the term propaganda, came about, and it's always difficult to really kind of pinpoint who exactly coined a phrase. Look to hip hop and ask anybody who came up with different phrases, and you'll get a who you talk to.
Right.
Certainly, that term, in large part originated from the idea that the material that was being generated by TV shows had direct influence and approval by actual police departments. So there. Agenda becomes a dirty word, but all it means is that a specific point of view that's conveyed, and definitely for those early shows, that specific point of view came from specific police departments. Now, because those shows were shot a lot of times in Los Angeles, that happened to be the LAPD. So a show like Dragnet worked hand in hand with the LAPD, which may or may not have the greatest track record with people in certain communities in Los Angeles. And I'm sure we'll get into all of that. So that's where that term originated. And from those shows, has descended a lot of the cop shows that we know even today. So the NCISs of today, the Law and Orders, the CSIs, they all owe their lineage to those early cop shows that owe their lineage from the cowboy Westerns before that. And certainly the goal, as David just, indicated, is the idea of in defining what propaganda is, can we now balance out how those stories are told? Because for a long time, that was kind of exclusively how those stories were told. The narrative that police officers are infallible for the most part, that there's good and there's bad, and the police are always good, and whoever they're opposing is always bad. Whoever they're opposing, just like the cowboys used to fight the Indians or Native Americans, happen to be the others a lot of times. So that transition into urban warfare, you get your Dirty Harrys fighting against the blacks, the Latinos, Latinx. Whoever's not Dirty Harry, that's who the gun is pointed at. That famous scene that Clint Eastwood has where he's talking about the Magnum, how powerful his Magnum gun is and how it can blow your head clean off. There's a black dude that's on the sidewalk looking up at him. That's kind of indicative of where we've been at with the lineage of propaganda. So, we're at a place though now where we're more aware of it. We can analyze it. We can have discussions like this and actually talk about it, and then talk about ways to actually expand, dismantle what's been kind of an exclusive lane for a long time.
Are we truly, maybe we are on this panel and others are, and I think thanks to social media, many have become even more aware. Because I've heard stories from people who say, yeah, when I was a kid, I'll watch John Wayne shooting up Indians, that I would actually side with John Wayne. And then they grew up and realized, oh, wait a minute, that something is wrong here. Yeah. I am the Native American, really, even though I'm not Native American, but I'm the Native American that John Wayne was shooting up. So that's what I'm asking. Is there any sense that the people, the gatekeepers, as we call them, the people in positions of power at TV networks, that they're aware? Are they feeling the pressure? Because especially against the backdrop of calls to defund the police, and criminal justice system reform, and differences in how mass shooters are treated when they're white versus not, things like that. I mean, do you sense that there is a real awareness and desire to make change? I guess I'll go to Barbara for that because I haven't heard from Barbara yet.
Well, when you talk about gatekeepers, are you talking about gatekeepers in the entertainment industry, or are you referring to, media gatekeepers?
How about both? Well, in your case, I mean, you write primarily scripted television. Mm-hmm. So let's say the people that cut your checks.
I mean, I think there's a growing awareness. It's still not obviously where we would like it to be, but I would say around 2017, 2018, we had, the Me Too movement. We had, I think it was Oscars So White, that movement. I think people are beginning to realize and become shamed when they're kind of going against, I don't want to say the social narrative and what should be, but when they're doing or embracing a worldview that feels sort of antithetical to where we are, if that makes sense. I mean, I think it's definitely shifting. I certainly felt a shift in the last maybe 4 or 5 years, but obviously, I mean, so much work needs to be done, because if you look at the upper echelons of our industry, they all kind of look the same. It's kind of a homogenous sort of minefield. And it's not people being racist. I think it's just a unconscious bias that's sort of dictated by a worldview that's never really been challenged until recently.
Beautifully said, Barbara. Beautifully said.
For you as an actor, since you're on, you're the only actor on the panel. So it's like I'm trying to relate or trying to understand how this would affect you as an actor. I mean, you play a bailiff in All Rise. So obviously casting decisions are affected, but also I don't know if you personally even have any input in terms of how your character is portrayed, and if you're heard, if you listen to, or if it's just kind of top down, like, okay, this is who the character is, this is what we want you to do. I mean, like what's that process?
I think that if I'm doing my job correctly, I think I am facilitating conversations about what would be realistic for me. as a young Black man in Los Angeles who is playing a bailiff and becomes a lawyer and an attorney. And one of the main thrusts of my portrayal was, hey, you know, you want Luke Watkins to be empathetic to these young men that are coming into the prison system. So how can I, as an actor and as an artist, create a real through line that is authentic to me? And that facilitated conversations of, well, this is where I'm from. This is my story. I'm from West Philly, or I'm from this neighborhood. And trying to layer in my truth. And that facilitated conversations where, as Barbara said, you know, I'm talking to a demographic that might not understand what it's like to be from West Philly and how far I've had to come to walk on a lot of Warner Brothers and portray myself in a way, you know?
Yeah, yeah, even during the sort of casting process, and when you're up for a part and you're going in to read, are there expectations? I mean, if only because you are a Black man walking into the room, are there expectations for how the character should be portrayed, or what they're expecting from you as an actor, you know, generally?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the thing that I was most excited about when I read the pilot of All Rise was that it's a young Black man hustling, working 2-3 jobs to become an attorney, you know, because deep down he wants to make a difference in his community, you know. And I think a lot of us that are from, you know, very, very humble beginnings understand how oppressive the system is in our lives. You know, I grew up understanding how foster care worked, understanding how, you know, how the police department worked in a way, understanding how getting out, probation, like I understood that, you know, but I never got to see myself on the other side of it. And that's why I love playing an attorney, you know, in the PD's office, because it's like, wow, I get to see, you know, I get to demystify a little bit of the fear that I felt as a young man when I saw my father coming in and out of the system. And like, you know, it's like I get to see myself. And I think in 10 years and 20 years and 30 years, I think it'll make a huge difference with this younger generation, seeing attorneys defending themselves, you know.
So I assume it's not what people might call a burden of representation. So you're not like, you're not thinking, oh, are you thinking, okay, I'm a Black man and I need to represent. I need to make sure that I am putting forward an image of a Black man, even though it's just one out of, you know, many. But still, like you're like, does that enter your mind? Do you think about that?
100%. I am 100% saying I would like to be an intellectual Black man. Like, you know, I've played enough alcoholics, drunks, wife beaters. Like, I am an educated Black man that understands how to read and write and understands, you know, how to conceptualize ideas and communicate them with words rather than a gun, you know what I mean, and violence. You know, and I'm very, yes, that is my day-to-day in my portrayal of this character, 100%.
That's something that Jay Alex just touched on that I really resonated with. It's perspective. In a writer's room, which is why I think it's so deathly important that writers' rooms be as diverse as possible, because you can't write from a perspective that you don't have. You can't write what you don't know. You can't write what you've never seen and what you've never experienced. And I think it's incumbent upon the powers that be, going back to what you had mentioned earlier. We have to create opportunities, you know, for a larger demographic and a larger representation of storytellers to be brought into the fold. Because when you do that, to your point, Jay Alex, you know, you'll get those kinds of stories. You know, you'll get the brothers and sisters that had to hustle because of, you know, really poor situations and kind of escape, circumstance. You have a different perspective of law enforcement. Before I joined the police department, I would tell people all the time, I wasn't always the police. I was a young Black boy growing up on the South Side of Chicago that had to deal with the police. My father hustled, he was a street cat. So I've seen his interactions with the police, and they weren't the greatest, quite frankly. And even as a police officer, right, as a Black man, I was constantly in conflict because I felt like everybody that I put handcuffs on looked like me. But for the grace of God, that could be me, on the other side of those handcuffs. It was my father, it was my uncles, it was my cousins, it was all of the older cats in the neighborhood that I looked up to. So again, and you're never really fully accepted into that fraternity. I've had, white officers when I was young and I was coming out of the academy, treat me and look at me like, you have a spot that my nephew should have. We're doing what we have to do because of social pressures, so don't get it twisted, and there's a line that, you sort of have to toe when you're operating in that kind of space. But I mentioned that, to kind of push the conversation into kind of this sort of direction. Rarely will you hear or see media stories about a Black police officer killing an unarmed Black man. That's not the narrative that, you'll see, pushed, and perpetuated. So for me, what I always do, or at least when I come to these kinds of stories and when I come into a writer's room and we're dealing with law enforcement subject matter, I always make it abundantly clear that we have to understand, where policing in America originated. 1865, once, slaves were freed, there was a deep-rooted sense in white America that Black people are going to now get together and they're going to get payback. They're going to kill us. They're going to rape our women. They're going to steal all of our stuff. They're going to burn our houses down. Police, sheriffs, and marshals, and some sort of magistrate to protect those people. That's where policing came from. That's the origin of it. And as long as you really understand that moving forward, the fact that white supremacists are definitely represented within the ranks of America's police departments. You have to understand that they're embedded in the ranks, in the military ranks. And when you get out of the military, because I spent some time in the Army as well, you leave the military and you go get a job on the police department. It's a natural kind of progression and segue. And the majority of those positions, again, in most of the departments around the country, are dominated or heavily populated by white people who still carry, through generations, that mentality. So we are looked at, as other. And we are looked at, in a lot of cases, and now I'm speaking specifically about people of color and marginalized communities, we are looked at as other. And because we are other, we are less than American. And because we are less than American, these attitudes, will always, bubble, to the surface, which is why, we have these encounters. And I think it's incumbent upon creatives like us to really understand that. And as we put pen to pad and we sit and we build these stories and we tell these stories and we give them to talented actors like, Jay Alex, that we're all on, the same page of like how we got here, right? And we have to be authentic and true, I think, to that sort of progression.
So I'm wondering how you made that transition. That's quite a transition.
Yeah.
But also what Aaron said earlier about law enforcement working with TV networks or writers, showrunners, whatever, to create these shows. And it's the same thing with film. We work with the military and whatever with many of these films, Michael Bay movies or whatever. And that still happens today, right? That hasn't changed. As far as I know, that is still going on. True?
Yeah. But I think the what happens is if you have former law enforcement, former military, on your writing staff, it's a little bit of a kind of a shortcut. And then what ends up happening is that, more times than not, there'll still be, a consultant, from, law enforcement on staff. The shows that I've worked on with a law enforcement element, we've had, consultants, and they'll come back. It's funny, like the process, like with 7 Seconds, for example, Vina, connected with a guy who was part of the New Jersey Police Department, white officer, good guy, but clearly, he had, a perspective and an opinion about the position that we took as it related to the portrayal of law enforcement that he sort of wanted to push back, on. And to Aaron's point, I think that puts us right into the lane of propaganda. Hey, that's really not, how that goes. And, that wouldn't happen that way. And, when I would arrive on set, I would have some discussions, and just some ideas. And I wouldn't lead with, hey, I was a cop in Chicago. I did this for, 6 years. I would just lead with, we're really about telling authentic, stories. And even your villain, the greatest villains, right, are people that you should be able to identify with and find some sort of commonality with. I don't agree with what you do and how you get down, but I understand it because I understand where it's coming from, right? Superman's father, came and wanted to, blow up Earth because it affected their planet. So in his mind, I'm saving my people, right? Everybody can relate to that kind of motivation. But at the end of the day, the people affected are us. So again, I get it. And that's, where a lot of the pushback is, but it should be really about telling the truth, and being authentic, in the storytelling.
I want to piggyback on that real quick too, with what David's saying. I mean, a few really great points that he made is that inherently having input or consultation from law enforcement or the military is not, negative or has to be evil unto itself.
Yeah.
True.
Where the question comes in is where we can have more voices at the table to have a more balanced, conversation. So what David just described, just him being able to engage with an officer and do point counterpoint to make sure we're getting as much of a well-rounded point of view and story as possible. That's the point. We've now matured to a point where we can recognize that we haven't always gotten a balanced point of view. We've been very far from that. So where that term again, propaganda, comes in is that we've only been able to see really one side of a point of view in the media and definitely in the content that we've been consuming. And that is that law enforcement and military, American military, are right. That those are the good guys always. Even aside from race and ethnicity, that's not even true. So when we're talking about trying to get to truth, meaning emotional truth, it behooves us to expand who's telling those stories and what points of view we're introducing into those stories. Something that Jay Alex mentioned too, when you're talking about portrayals of these roles, is that representation absolutely matters a ton. It's not just a slogan or a hashtag. I'm partly in this business because I grew up watching Andre Brower on Homicide.
Yeah.
Or that, Avery Brooks when he played my man, Man Called Hawk.
Hawk, yeah.
These are the early black male, street heroes that I saw.
Yep.
But the difference is that all of those guys were written by white dudes for the most part. So they could only go so far. They were. It was great to see their faces, but the words and experiences coming out of their mouths was like, that's written by a middle-aged white dude. I mean, black man to do this and that, or at that point of view. So what the hope would be is that we're able to build on that so that you don't just have, because a lot of times these networks and studios, they'll feel like they address these issues by just handling the visual. I'll cast a black person in that role, done, right? Meanwhile, everyone behind that face, who are putting voice into that face and words and dialogue coming out of that mouth, has nothing to do with the person of color's experience in America. So the goal is just try to balance that out so that you can actually get to those layers that Jay Alex is referring to. If you want to get to those layers, the fact that such and such character came from humble beginnings and made, a real American journey, the most American journey you can make, becoming successful despite the odds. You have to have somebody, as David indicated, who understands that journey and can actually articulate that effectively. Otherwise, what you'll get a lot of times really is kind of more, it's blackface solution, so to speak. So again, we'll just, we had this idea, we'll just change it to a person of color.
Black person, right.
And it's all addressed, but that typically is a cynical solution as opposed to getting to the heart of the matter, which is how can we have more in-depth, nuanced, smarter conversations like David had on set with the consultant that he was talking to. How can we have those conversations and reflect those through the characters and the content that we're portraying?
To that point, the Vanity Fair piece that you wrote, there was a quote that you mentioned, David Milch. This was like in the mid-90s when he said that Black writers are unable to write universal stories due to a burden of anger and an inability to achieve emotional neutrality. And you pushed back against that, which was great. You said, I disagree with this idea. I also wonder if emotional neutrality should always be the goal of good writing. And then I remembered there's this Toni Morrison quote about, she said, my stories are not meant to be universal. If I wrote universal story, she said, it will be water. It strips it of all its, perspective and meaning. And I remember that very well. And that stayed with me when I first heard it, because I think that's true. I think we're being asked to write stories that have wide universal appeal, but there's universality in specificity as well. So it's kind of like what Aaron said in the piece, which is, actually, no, we don't have to. Like, well, what does that mean? What does it mean writing stories? So I kind of wanted to hear, Aaron or Barbara, Jay Alex, you guys can jump in as well. What you think about this idea, what he said. Well, first of all, is that still a sort of commonly held belief, do you think, amongst white producers, showrunners, et cetera? And should we care about writing what they call universal stories?
I want to hear from Barbara on this.
I love that Toni Morrison quote, or was it Toni? Yeah. But I think I have always believed firmly that specificity is where truth lies, and we all sort of see ourselves in specificity. Like if you have a Korean mother who always says that particular thing, that is actually going to resonate with Latinos, it's going to resonate with Blacks, it's probably going to resonate with white people. Like, I think the specificity comes from such an organic place, and we shouldn't run from it. And, I think that speaks to the universality of the human experience, because when you really think about it, we're all sort of on the same, people have the same wants and desires, right? We come from different social strata, and we are influenced by different sort of socio-political, economic influences, but we all, want to go to work every day. We love our families. We want to come home to someone we love. It's the human experience is not so different. So, I absolutely think specificity matters. If we could just double back one, because I just want to touch on, I thought it was really interesting, Jay David, because I'm a huge fan of 7 Seconds. I thought it was amazing. When you have to have these conversations with law enforcement, or when you are specifically going against the sort of commonly held sort of homogenous sort of view, how do you keep those conversations from getting too heated so that people walk away and don't listen? Or how do you keep people from being defensive? And then how hard do you fight to affect the story and win that argument? That's always something I've really struggled with, and I would love to hear more and get some advice.
Barbara, I start those conversations with the end game in mind. I know where we want to land. I know on the story page, and at the time I was working for Vina, and Vina was very, very specific about what she wanted, right?
Yeah.
So if at the end of the day, we want to paint this picture, right? I'll have the discussion with the consultant who says it's not quite that way. And then, I will say, how can we take that, but end up here? How can we make that work? Right.
Right.
Are there things that we can take into consideration that, sort of allows us to split the difference? If this is where, we want to end up, and this is how we want this character portrayed, or these are the actions that, we want to end up. And to prevent it from becoming a pissing contest, to, your question with it, Barbara, it's really about, okay, I appreciate that, duly noted, but this is what, we're going to do.
Right.
Because consultants are extremely helpful, extremely, and you don't want to, discredit or discount, what they bring, to the table. But it's hard having creative conversations with subject matter experts who say it's this, and this, and there is no gray area, in that. They don't operate in a creative space. It's very, this is what it is, and this is how we do what we do. What we as creatives try to do is get into the humanity of it and find the nuance, right?
Right.
So again, when I approach those conversations, I always start with the end in mind. I know where we want to end up. I know what we want this scene to be. I know what we need these characters to do. How can you help us, achieve that? That offers a level of authenticity, because that's why you're here and that's what you bring. But also at the same time, they're not going to agree, totally with what you end up doing. And that's okay. That's okay. Because if that were in fact the case, it takes us all the way back to what Aaron had mentioned at the very beginning of the conversation. You get that one-sided perspective from, the guys who've been building these widgets that way since the beginning of time, but we're trying to evolve, and we're trying to move the conversation, forward. And it's hard, when your truth, is called out, as a Black, writer, when I have to write a scene that doesn't paint us as a people in the best light.
Yeah.
I always fall back on what's truth, right? What is truth? And if my truth is that, because I was a guy in a family on food stamps. We did have roaches in the house. You know what I mean? Me and my cousin did share, clothes and, all of those things, right? That was our experience, and if I'm telling the truth and the truth of that character, I'm okay with that. I can go to sleep at night knowing that, like I said, I'm telling an authentic story, but that's not the only story that I tell. You know what I mean? That's not the only story. That's one particular slice. And I think as Black creatives, that's the benefit from which we operate, and I think that our counterparts, a lot of times don't really understand that, because we've been sort of force fed their culture and been indoctrinated to everything that they do, from our educational choices to everything, their politics, their version of history, all of those things. We get that, but you've never walked in my shoes, before. So I'm kind of coming to it. I always use like the bilingual, example. There's a whole experience that I understand that you don't know anything, about. And Aaron and I can have a conversation in a writer's room, right? That they won't understand at all, right? And that's okay, because we're coming from a shared experience and a shared, culture. When we invite you into that, so that, you understand, then I think that's the creative process. That's the beauty of it, because then what they can bring is, but I see it from this perspective. Case in point, we would have the conversation in, writers' rooms about, well, whenever a white cop kills or shoots a Black person or an unarmed Black person, there's just community outrage, oh my God. But when Pookie and Tyrone are beefing about whatever, and Pookie shoots Tyrone, crickets. So that's just what it is. And you know what? They're right, because there's a level of hypocrisy, in that, with us. But once again, I take it back to, a lot of what, the motive of it is, which is why, I was saying I wanted to mention that rarely will you hear that a Black police officer, shot to death an unarmed Black man, right? Because our beefs, Tyrone and Pookie's beef, probably at the end of the day is about, inaccessibility to, some sort of, conflict resolution, mechanism. And I don't want to get, too, down that rabbit hole too much, but they're operating from a disadvantage. They're operating from places of, this is all I understand. This is the only way that I know how to resolve this particular issue.
Yeah, there's a socio-political and economic context to all of that too. So it's like, yeah, it's a much bigger conversation. But back to Barbara real quick. You're primarily writing in horror and thriller, sci-fi, I think is what your bio says. And so I will think that even that in that space, given that these are the more sort of fantastical genres where anything goes, really. You can just make it up. I mean, it's all makeup anyway, but still, but this is, you're writing, yeah. So like, I will think that in that space, there will be some extra sort of imagination, at least, even from the showrunners or producers, that, hey, anything can happen. Yeah, we could have a Black cop who is Superman, or, just like there's variations and there's much more freedom, I guess is what I'm looking for. Is that not the case?
You would think that, but I've worked on, some sci-fi projects, and I'm speaking specifically about, some sci-fi TV projects. And in one, I was hired, I read the first 3 scripts, and I remember reading them and thinking, oh my gosh, so every minority character has a fatal flaw and is literally just there to be the foil to the perfect white character. And all of the women are useless. And the staff of this show were the loveliest, most liberal, dynamic human beings that you would ever meet in your life. And they still together, just managed to write every sort of stereotype in the book. And I just remember going in there thinking, how do I go in and try to affect the storytelling in a way that gives these very one-dimensional minority and female characters some dimension? What can we do there? And so, I mean, I don't think I fought as hard as I possibly could, but I remember there was a Black character who was just violent and angry. We haven't seen that 1,000 times before. And I remember thinking, well, maybe this is the guy who is an amazing reader. He is the most literate, most educated person on this ship. Can we give him another color? And there was an Asian character who was just a bitch for no reason, typical dragon lady stereotype. And I just thought, okay, well, maybe this character is a lesbian and has faced discrimination because of her sexual orientation in the military. And so trying to write this woman as sort of nuanced and interesting, and we pitched it to the actress and we loved it. And I thought, made a really wonderful episode about her and her wife. But I always feel somewhat intimidated because being usually the only voice of color in a room and often the only woman, it's hard to figure out how hard you should push back without offending and insulting people and, getting yourself put portrayed in a bad light. You don't want to be seen as combative, I would say, and I've had people ghost me on a TV. I had a TV movie where I just said, everybody in this movie is white. Can we add, is there room for diversity here? And never heard another thing. It was total ghost. And I tried to couch it in it's 2020, maybe we're really thinking about diversity and we don't want to, we want to stay with the times and be very current, but it ruffled the wrong feathers. And And it's just very difficult sometimes being, the only person. But back to your point, yes, you would think sci-fi would, but sci-fi falls into the same stereotypes as any other genre, which is so frustrating because
Can I
do
ask,
anything.
can I add something to that? Because I don't write sci-fi, but I watch it and I'm a fan of sci-fi and a lot of what Barbara's done. It's interesting that a lot of the stuff we're talking about, because of 2020, it was the procedurals and cop material that got illuminated. But what I remind everyone of is this is a universal problem through every genre of content that we put out. I mean, there's arguments right now online over a Star Wars character who was a black woman, and it's easier for some people, who are in fandom to imagine a three-headed dragon or a miniature-sized green puppet who teaches wisdom. It's easier for them to believe that exists than a black woman in the Star Wars universe. That stuff comes from, again, the idea of this is the way certain stories need to be told. This is the perspective in which I'm used to seeing them. As soon as that changes, then there's resistance from certain corners, and so that's part of the fight that we're in artistically. On the artistic side is to really, if you love the craft, if you love the genre, if you love the stories that are being told, in that case, if you love the Star Wars universe, then why not maximize the stories that can be told, the different types of characters. And there's one other thing I would add to that too, is I think, and it's something that Jay Alex had mentioned earlier, was the burden of representation, and Tambay, you mentioned it too, is something a lot of creators of color, artists of color have always felt. One of the things that I hope that we're able to do is get out of this place that I think a lot of us are put in, where you're kind of between a rock and a hard place. On one hand, your aunts, your uncles, your grandparents, they want positive representation. Want to make sure that all the characters of color are upstanding and the smartest, and Hollywood actually started to deliver that to a certain extent when they started casting black people and people of color in a lot of these shows and movies. It's like judges. That's where you get your black judges from. That's where you get your sergeants and your generals. Mm-hmm. The problem has never been like, all right, cast us in like positive images, because we can get that. It's make us three-dimensional, make us real, is what Barbara just indicated, which is let's get empathy for, we can have flawed characters, but let's understand why that person is flawed. A person can be a general and have a substance abuse problem, but I need to understand where that's coming from. It can't just be because that person is black and you don't understand anything else about it. What are the three dimensions? Because I would always argue that there are times growing up where the one-dimensional black judge that I would see on TV was in some ways almost as destructive as the one-dimensional crack addict, because neither one of them were human. Neither one of them were real, fully realized individuals. They were simply, afterthoughts that were tossed in for a little sprinkling of spice, so to speak. Where we're at now, where I think we're ready for, is to now take those characters and go, no, there's more dimensions to those characters. Where's the empathy? Where are the layers? Where's the humanity? And that's what you're looking to do. That's where the actors, the writers, the producers can come together and just demand more. And it doesn't even require necessarily more real estate in the shows. It just requires better, more developed scenes and moments and dialogue insight into where people are coming from and what their points of view are. I think in a perfect world, you take something that David's been indicating, those different points of view, and it's not eliminating the point of view you don't agree with. That doesn't do anything either. It's including that, but just providing more counterpoints so that we can have better stories, better drama, more interesting characters.
Yeah, we have a few minutes left, but I want to bring it back to Jay Alex since we're talking actors now. And I remember something that Viola Davis said. She said it a number of times that her most favorite role that she's played was when she played a serial killer on Law and Order. And it was in a procedural, by the way, Law and Order: Criminal Intent. She played a serial killer, and she said that it was such an unusual part to have a black woman in, and she just ate it up. She was just, and because it was far more complex a character than any that she'd ever played before that point, and maybe even for much of her career after that. I think this was in the early 2000s or something. Anyway, but J. Alex, yeah, it's I would assume that for you, it's like Aaron was saying, and also like David and Barbara have said, the complexity of the characters, and I mean that's the draw, that's the attraction, that's what you look for in roles that you are presented with, that you audition for.
Exactly. Yeah, you guys are all it's such an honor to be with you guys, because like, wow, you're amazing people and so articulate in how you break it down. Because as a young actor in Hollywood, it's like you experience all of this, but you can't articulate it, and then drama happens and then you learn, and then another thing over here happens and you learn. So I'm at that point where I've been on the show, for, the last 5 years, and in a demographic of white leadership. Now with working for OWN and Oprah, and D. Lawrence Harris has a show, it is very, very different. But it's
Also,
very interesting to experience it, and you guys articulate it so well. It's amazing.
how is it different since it's now at OWN? But can you just maybe summarize?
So everything that you guys are saying, like, it's okay now to take up space and have can we like roll this onion back here and talk about the layers and why is this person making this choice, rather than, oh, well, we don't have time for that conversation. That's what it is, Jay. Now we can talk about it. Hey, we did a scene yesterday and it was like, if my girlfriend comes in and says she missed her period, I want to play the scene like this because I want to play it from an empathetic place. Like, I care about the baby, rather than, oh, well, we're going to get rid of it, or whatever the stereotypical portrayal is. Like, no, I want to actually do it from a more layered, he's thinking about his decisions perspective. And now we can do that. And Oprah is it's just inspiring being in a Black female-led environment as well, because it just feels like it's okay to do the work.
It's tricky. It's tricky because I sat in on a closed door conversation with the NAACP a couple of days ago, and without getting too deep into it or unpacking it too much, a lot of the conversation centered around how do you occupy the space, right, without offending those people who allowed you into the space, right?
There it is.
How is it that, how do you have a voice in a room and in a place where you feel inherently just like a guest? I had a mentor tell me, David, you should always seek to be in places where you are celebrated and appreciated, as opposed to just being tolerated, right? Mm-hmm. It's tough, but here's what I would suggest, and I want to give this directly to you, Barbara, my sister.
Give this to me.
Directly to you. You are where you are because you are good at your job, right? Don't lead with, I'm a Black woman. Don't lead with that. You are a writer and you have a voice, right? And as long as you lean into that, right, and you push the suggestions that, will make these characters richer and better, keep doing that. It's not about being rude. Aaron might have told me this once: pitch something once. If they don't bite, pitch it maybe one more time, because maybe your idea, wasn't quite clear. But once you've done that, let it go, right? Let it go. Because what you've done is you've planted the seed. And sometimes in a writing role, your idea will circle all the way around and it'll come all the way back. And that's where you guys will land. Now, whether you get credit for that or not, that's another conversation. But I want to encourage you to speak up, to speak your mind, to express yourself, because that's why writers are brought into rooms, because we need a different voice. Barbara, they need your experience. They need your perspective, whether they realize it or not. And you have to stay in that space, because what's going to happen? Aaron fought the battle, right, as the only one, so that I could get a job, right? So that I could come into the space, because somebody said, you know what? That Aaron guy is okay. Maybe there's somebody else out there that we can bring into this space to do what we do, right? I interned, and I'll be quick, guys. I interned at HBO when I was in grad school at SC, and the conversations that were happening around me were bone chilling. Right. I literally wanted to scream at the top of my lungs. They would say things like, well, there are no Black writers. What? What do you mean there are no Black writers? Because they think that way, because some of the powers that be still think that way. There are no diverse voices, of color. We can't find a Black writer to tell the Sammy Davis Jr. story. That's ridiculous, right? Which is why, like I said, guys, it's so important that we remain in these spaces. It's a hard rope and it's a hard line to walk, yes. And if you need those times where, during the breaks, you got to go outside and walk around the block and just get some air and come back in and gather yourself and go right back in. It's not about being disrespectful or pushy. Understand what the hierarchy is, yes, but you got to keep, fighting, and you got to keep that door open for the people that are coming behind you. Because where I'm really encouraged is that, Jay Alex, there used to be the same 5 or 6 Black actors that you saw getting the same roles, right? And there were 5 people working all the time. Now there are generations of young, actors coming into the space, coming into the game. And not only are they coming into the space and coming into the game, they're coming into it and they're elevating, right?
Yes.
The work. They're coming in with talent and training. And it's not I'm buff and cute and, Cassie. These people are coming in with serious chops, right? And as a writer, you get excited because, oh my God, they
can do the material,
on it, and then it's a real collaboration. But we have to stay engaged and we have to stay in these spaces. And with you being over there with D, man, listen, you got an idea, go to her, talk to her. Hey D, I was thinking about this, because she's going to listen and she's going to be open and she's going to be receptive. It's kind of like working with somebody who understands your walk and your journey, and then there's a shorthand, right? And it will make sense to them because they share your experience, right?
Yes.
And it's really about educating other folks and allowing them to allow us to contribute, in a meaningful way. Sometimes they will, man, and sometimes they won't. There's an organization, Voices of Color. We call ourselves Voices of Cool. Sometimes. The cats like Aaron who started it, right? They remember they would tell stories about, man, you remember when it used to be the 6 of us? Or remember when it used to be, it was just this, it was just us, right? But it seems like new members are coming all the time. So we're coming, but we just have to remain in these spaces, right? To keep the ball rolling and to keep the progression coming. I'm that dude who, when they said the party was at capacity, we can't let anybody else in. I was the dude who was like, come on, man, just one more. All right, man, we're going to let you in. And what I would do is, like, it's the 6 dudes that came with me. We all going in, right? And that's the way that we need to really look at how we come into these spaces and how we, tell, stories and how we contribute, to the greater tapestry, and make a solid, impact. So stay encouraged. Stay encouraged. That's really what I want to tell you. Stay encouraged.
Love that. Love that.
Yeah, it's a good way to end it. But I would like to David has kind of answered the question already, but I'd like to hear from the three of you, which is what gives you hope? What do you cling to when you get up every morning and you go to work? What makes you optimistic about the future? Ladies first. Sorry, Barbara.
Well, in the last maybe 4 or 5 years, as a sci-fi writer, I used to always send my scripts out with my initials, so I wouldn't have people know that it was a woman who was writing this edgy sort of sci-fi script. And I think in the last, 4 or 5 years, ever since kind of like the Get Out and the Black Panther, when I think Hollywood realized, oh my gosh, people will watch stories with predominantly African American casts. It does feel like there's been a massive shift sort of towards maybe embracing diversity. And even just being on this panel, I think, wow, there's so many great voices that I don't think were here, 10 years ago feeling empowered to speak. So that's probably the thing that's gotten me the most excited. Like, it just feels like there's been a shift and it's going to keep shifting. And there are people who are not afraid to take up space and are not afraid to tell you to take up space. So yeah, it's great.
Alex?
I will echo what Barbara said. That's exactly how I feel. It's like there's so much change. You see it. There are people encouraging you. This conversation, every single day, there's another, what David said, what Aaron said, there are generations. It's not just the same 3 Black actors. We're elevating the material. We're making box office. The studios are making more and more, it just feels integrated, and it feels like collectively we're all pushing forward with the world as well. I mean, ditto Barbara. She said it better.
Aaron, you have the last word.
I mean, what gets me excited and optimistic is living another day. I have air in my lungs. We all have air in our lungs. We have another day to live.
Praise God.
We always talk about, when people say, aren't you an angry Black man? It's like, no. I mean, there's anger there, but I'm optimistic. I have to be alive and continue to actually dare to live as a Black man in America. That means I at least feel like it's worth living. Life is worth living. Life is worth, life is worth being persistent in and thriving. So what gets me most excited are the opportunities that we're looking at. The fact we're having conversations like this, the fact that we have technology now where, if you don't find an outlet or a system or a studio or network that doesn't respond to your idea, go tell your story elsewhere. Figure out a way to tell your story. There are enough artists around now where you're not alone in the same way that you would have been in previous generations. So we have to continue to build on that, lift each other up, and get your stories out there. Understand all of us are multifaceted artists. So if you have a story to tell and, you're getting closed doors and people are telling you that your story is too specific or whatever, that's not the be all end all. Go grab a camera, meet up with your actor friends, you have, editor friends, you have, cinematographers. And if you don't have those people, go meet those people, go to different film festivals, go to different, have writing groups, that kind of thing. But bottom line is that we have resources that we've never had before that can allow us to lift each other up, to support each other. And that's how Hollywood was built in the early days. Steven Spielberg wasn't Steven Spielberg by himself. He was Steven Spielberg because he was mentored by others before him. Francis Ford Coppola, Spielberg, Scorsese, they were all buddies. They all
George Lucas,
Lucas, the film brats, so to speak. They would all give each other notes, make each other stronger. They didn't exist as solo individuals. They sought each other out. We now have enough people around, and you have enough of an awareness where you don't have to be alone. You're not out here fighting that fight on the frontier, from the frontier, so to speak, the way you would have been if you were of previous generations. I just think the strength in numbers. We need to lift each other up and make sure we come together in various capacities, whether you choose to tell your stories within the Hollywood system itself or you choose to tell your stories outside of it. Just keep telling your stories. You have a lot of people to have your back and have your interests at heart as far as wanting to see people and artists actually thrive and take the next step.
And hopefully in 5 years, we're not having the same conversation. At least we're not having the same way. We're not talking about the same issues that we're talking about here, and that will be a sign that things have improved and things have gotten better, even if it's incremental. That's how it is. But on behalf of the SAG-AFTRA Foundation, I want to thank Aaron Thomas, J. David Shanks, Barbara J. Marshall, and J. Alex Brinson for sharing your experiences and time, your process, crafts with your fellow talents.